analysis, engage in political education, and get involved in meaningful action. We're so glad you're here with us tonight, and we'll get started in just a minute. With United We Dream. With Spanish interpretation is provided on this call. If you wish to hear the Spanish interpretation, please select the globe icon on your computer or the more or the three dots icon on your tablet or smartphone. Select language interpretation and choose Spanish in the pop-up. Buenas noches y bienvenidos espacio para escuchar información y análisis, participar en la educación política y tomar acción. Hay interpretación en español. Si deseas escuchar la interpretación en español, por favor, deseleccionar el icónico de globo en la computadora o en el menú de que aparece.
Hi, good evening, and welcome to On the Frontline, Meeting the Moment. We're so glad you can join us tonight. If you're watching on Zoom, please use the chat to say hello, where you're from, how you're feeling today. My name is Monifa Bandele, and I sit on the policy table leadership team for the Movement for Black Lives. Before we get started, we really want to acknowledge the moment that we're in right now. Many of us are still processing the horrific images of white supremacists storming the Capitol last week. We know all too well what they were trying to do, to overturn Black, Brown, and Indigenous votes. We are shocked but not surprised by the police complicity with the mob. And we know from lived experience that if those people had been us, if those people had been Black folks, the police response would have been much different, much more violent, and probably excessively more deadly. At the same time, many of us are also still celebrating that we changed the balance of power in this country against all odds. People in Georgia, our people, you did that. Many of us are feeling the relief that there's only one more week left of Trump's presidency. And there's a light at the end of the pandemic tunnel. In spite of the botched rollout, the so far of the COVID vaccines. And like many of you out there, my family was hit with COVID, and I lost an aunt this summer. So we are just on the edge of our seats, looking for the light at the end of this tunnel. It is a fluid and chaotic moment. The GOP is in crisis. After calling on Vice President Pence to use the 25th Amendment to remove Trump, today the House of Representatives voted to make Trump the first US president to be impeached not once, but twice, including an unprecedented 10 House GOP leaders voting to impeach. We now focus our demand on the Senate to follow through with full impeachment. With all of this happening, it makes perfect sense to be feeling a deep sense of grief, rage, joy, and hope, all at the same time. All of these things are true. We have won so much by working together, by harnessing our collective power, and we celebrate our victories. And yet there is still so much more that we need and deserve. We will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder, walk together towards freedom and towards our freedom dreams. At InfraBL, we know that the work we have done together is and will continue to be powerful. We know that we keep us safe. So who's on the front line? In a moment like this, the front line is more important than ever. The front line is a collaboration of the Movement for Black Lives, the Working Families Party, United We Dream, and the Rising Majority. This is our squad. We are faced with ongoing threats of white supremacy and violence and the devastation caused by the Trump presidency and blatant efforts to undermine democracy, the democracy that is already fragile. But here on the front line, we have made the choice to stand together, to stand up against white supremacy and fascism, to work together for a bright future where we all live in equality, equity, and justice, where we all are treated with dignity and respect, and where all of our communities have the freedom to thrive. Last spring and summer, we witnessed the largest social movement in US history. Many of you took to the streets to defend Black lives. Many of you worked hard to move the energy to build powerful strategies. Many of you have already taken action with the front line through our text team, election defenders, joy to the polls, or voter engagement with one of our partner organizations. Thank you. We will keep building our collective power to fight for a bold and progressive agenda for the incoming Biden-Harris administration and beyond. So I'm just going to do a review now for our agenda tonight, and we have a very, very powerful event. We will begin with the grounding. We'll have two short political education presentations to help us understand how we got to this current moment and the ongoing threat from white wing extremists. Then we'll hear conversations between leaders of the front line in dialogue with each other that will help us make sense of this moment and how to move forward from here. We'll close out with a report back from Right to the City. It's National Day of Action to Stop Evictions, and then we'll wrap up. Before I dive in, I want to preview some of the actions we'll be inviting you to, and we'll repeat these again later on. This Saturday, January 16th, the Frontline is holding Forward Together, a mass organizing virtual event as part of the presidential inauguration week. Later in the call, crews from leaders from the front line will be inviting you to take action together on MLK Day. Don't miss this unique call to action designed to meet you where you are and give you a variety of options to stand together in this moment. And you won't want to miss the upcoming Frontline mass calls, Frontline defender trainings on evictions and deportation defenses on January 27th and February 3rd. Last but not least, trolling. When you fight for justice and liberation, there will always be some haters. They're the most visible of our work. The more visible our work, the more they will come for us. It is disturbing, but we will not be surprised. If there are trolls in this event tonight, if you see any hateful messages in the Zoom chat, please flood the chat with solidarity and positive messages. So now we'll turn it over to Fahasha Hassan for our grounding.
Apologies, y'all. Vahisha Hassan, so good to see all of y'all, to be here to hold this space with you guys tonight. I am not excited about why we are having to gather, but I am deeply encouraged that the gathering is happening, and I totally still believe that we will win. So I'm super excited to have this moment to ground. So let's do that together. Wherever you are, get in a little bit of a space, get a little comfy. And I'm gonna say y'all a lot because I'm Southern, and this is how we are inclusive in the South. It's our Southern speak love language. So life has been and is unrelenting. It just keeps coming and coming. It comes in rushes of beauty and waves of anguish. If last year was not enough of a viral pandemic and virulent, nonstop state-sanctioned terror on full display last week, somebody's cousins got the most in their feelings and put their hatred and fear and violence on full display for the world to hopefully actively no longer ignore. It is in times like this, when I am in distress, when my body is in distress, when my people are in distress, that I go to my playlist. Anybody out there got a playlist? Those who love me and those who I love, we send music back and forth in playlists to make it through life's things. I know last week, Reverend Osaji Foseku grounded us about going to the well, and his life and his music is also a deep well for me. Music lifts me when I am low, grounds me when I am scattered, knits me back together when I am unraveling. Music sits with me in my questions and moans with me through my lament. It's the melodies, y'all. Y'all know the melodies? Shout out your favorite melody. The melodies remind me that listening and hearing happens with my whole body and my full self. It's not just a hear thing, it's not just an ability thing. Listening is full of your whole self. Nina Simone reminds me that my skin is black, that backlash blues ain't nothing new, and true love blooms for the world to see. Now, my favorite group, Sweet Honey and the Rock, reminds me that we bring more than a paycheck to our loved ones and families, and ask how long, and if change don't come, we just gonna have to go get us some. That we will not bow down to racism. We will not bow down to injustice. We will not bow down to exploitation, because we gonna stand. And that's on the front line, right? That's why y'all on the call today. They even have a song that repeats, listen to the rhythm, listen to the rhythm, listen to the rhythm. So what we are not gonna do, family, is allow hateful threats, tweets, Facebook posts, Instagram stories, hot mess, TikToks, news, shenanigans, or even violent rhetoric and violent actions of the wrong right steal our rhythm. So let this moment right here, this right now, let's be present in this moment. Let it be an opportunity to individually and collectively remember that there is a rhythm available, a particular beat that speaks to us, that grounds us, that anchors us in our lives and in this frontline work. So roll your body a bit. Loosen up the tense places, unclench some tight areas, depressurize some of those pressed down places. You feel them? I know you feel them. I feel them. Close your eyes if that's a comfy place for you. Look up if that's where your help comes from. Head down if that is how you go inward. Connect with me if that just is what feels best. Then breathe. Just breathe that beat in. There is a rhythm. What vibrations do you feel? Breathe in, inhale. Exhale. At first, it might be the vibrations under or around you. Fill your lungs up, fill them as full as they can be out here in this pandemic, panoramic streets. Empty your lungs, feel lighter, breathe in and breathe on. Be breathed on. Then maybe it will be a vibration that's within you, something a little closer to you. This is not an external vibration. This is an internal beat, an internal rhythm. Be in tune, be in that tune. That's your rhythm. Most times for me, it's a heartbeat. Ba-boom, ba-boom. Feel yours. Where is your tune? Where is your rhythm? Other times it's a drum beat, an ancient reverberation I don't even have my own memory of, an ancestral chorus of messages just carried through the air, carried in our bodies, nestled in our souls. Messages, can you feel them, of celebration, messages of mourning, messages of warning, messages of preparation, messages of readiness. Are you ready, y'all? Remember yours, your ancestral rhythm. It is available. Let it just pull you in. Inhale, exhale. Sometimes for me, it's Tomorrow by Sweet Honey and the Rocks. Tomorrow brings a hard and heavy load. My life, my joy, my fear, my anger, my love, my dreams, my struggle for change. Ba-boom, ba-boom. my life, my joy, my fear, my anger, my love, my dreams, my struggles for change. Ba-boom, ba-boom. Other times it just goes back. Oh, back to Nina. Birds flying high, you know how I feel. Sun in the sky, you know how I feel. Breeze drifting on by, you know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me, and I'm feeling good. Ba-boom, ba-boom. Fish in the seas, you know how I feel. River running free, you know how I feel. Blossoms on the tree, you know how I feel. Ba-boom, ba-boom. Dragonfly out at the sun, you know what I mean. Butterflies all having fun, you know what I mean. Sleep in peace when the day is done, that's what I mean. And this old world is a new world and a bold world for me. Stars when you shine, you know how I feel. Scent of the pine, you know how I feel. The freedom is mine, and I know how I feel. It's a new dawn, it's a new day, it's a new life for me, and I'm feeling good. Ba-boom, ba-boom. Whatever you are feeling, feel it all of the way. Let it resound loud as the roaring seas. Let it fill you up when you are empty and lift you up when you are down. Move you when you are stuck. Remind you when you have forgotten. Be still with you when stillness is best. Keep your rhythm. Return to it as needed. Let your rhythm return to you. There is rhythm available. And it's powerful and it's yours. And we, collectively, we need you to retain your rhythm so that we all may remain in this frontline work, that we all may be free. Ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. Inhale that in, exhale that out. Ashe.
So much, Faisha. Keisha, Hashan, we needed that. Thank you so much for that beautiful grounding. Thank you just for bringing us and actually helping me. You just completely and totally centered me. I appreciate you. I do also want to say that Fahisha is the executive director of Movement in Faith. She's a faith rooted organizer working at the intersections of faith, social justice, and mental health. And we saw her bring that all together and love on us just now. So thank you so much. Next up, I want to introduce Pam Campos Palma. We're going to now hear two short but powerful presentations to help us understand the current political moment. After that, we will hear reflections from several grassroots leaders of the front line. In dialogue with each other, they will help us to make sense of this moment and invite you to engage in meaningful action. This conversation will include our special guest, Barbara Ransby. Be sure to stick around for that. Pam Campos Palma is a political strategist, a veteran of the post 9/11 wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the Deputy of Peace and Security at the Working Families Party. She will walk us through some background about how we got here and why we are demanding Congress impeach, expel, and investigate, and to abolish the Electoral College.
Hi, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here with you, especially now. Thank you for that needed grounding and just honored to be here with the Frontline. We've all weathered a painful and hard week. I know that it's very personal to me. Something we cannot forget, that I cannot forget, is that we are winning. We are winning. We are winning. In the last couple of months, we delivered an electoral college defeat to Donald Trump. I remember for one brief moment, I saw people all across this country erupting with joy and hope. And for that moment, I felt free because it felt like we toppled a fascist because we did. Through the rigorous leadership and brilliance of Black women and femmes at the tip of the spear, we won not one, but 2 seats in Georgia when some folks called it a day. We did the remarkable. And in the face of white nationalist backlash to multiracial democratic power, we helped today see Donald Trump be impeached for a second time. But we're not done yet. I want to break down for you some of the demands of the Working Families Party, of the Movement for Black Lives, and the Rising Majority in response to the white nationalist invasion at the US Capitol last Wednesday, and actions that we can take together to ensure that we keep winning. White nationalism has rationalized genocide, enslavement, and never-ending wars. For a destructive police state that we witnessed last week does not keep us safe in the ways that we deserve. There are many things that are important, but one thing I'm thinking about a lot right now is the consistencies of abusers that gaslight us. We all know them. People that lie to us and manipulate us, saying our abuse isn't real. Particularly for Black and brown and working class people, us being told that we must continue to eat abuse and inequity and violence. But we will not forget. I do not forget the way that Trump has fetishized war crimes, and he betrayed us in a deadly pandemic. I will not forget the association of a white nationalist commander-in-chief, the GOP that has consistently protected him, the 143 Republican senators and congressional supporters, the white nationalists in the police and the military, and all of them conspiring together to lie to us about the attacks on our democracy, even when we witnessed it, to lie to us about inciting white nationalist violence that very well could have killed many members of Congress and even their families that were in that building. The same Congress with the power to hold their white nationalist king who has abandoned our country in our greatest times of need to save his own skin. They, make no mistake, are on each other's team, and it is very important that we remember their association and their coordinations. This is a dangerous insider threat. We've learned that GOP members have given tours to insurrectionists, coordinated with their leaders, and even are trying to carry guns in the House floor after seeing this horrific violence. They are the insurrection party, and I will not be told to hold hands with abusers or to have unity with fascists. WP believes that it is important to connect these dots because we already see that Republicans themselves, including the prominent ones who for months have amplified Trump's lies, voted to object to the Electoral College certification even after the storming of the Capitol, trying to distance themselves from what happened. In a time when our country has no head of state, who is leading? Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Ilhan Omar, the most under attack, stepping in front, leading, because they are our team, and we are on the side of freedom and justice, and we are winning. The GOP has engineered politics of hate and greed for the wealthy and well-connected, and we will not forget. We're demanding impeach, expel, and investigate. It's really simple. A lot of folks are complicating it, but we're going to break it down, and we're going to have this drumbeat because we can do this. There can be no healing without accountability. Impeach. Our first demand is that Trump be impeached because he incited an attempted coup to overthrow a fair election, sabotaging a peaceful transition of power. You probably heard that today the House voted to impeach Trump. And thank you to the thousands of people that have signed our petition, called your members of Congress. That happened, but we're not done. The next step is that Trump be convicted by the Senate so that he will never again hold public office and threaten us like he has now. Mitch McConnell, soon to be out of power as Senate Majority Leader, is refusing to do his job again and hold a trial. So we must stay organized, we must stay vigilant and push for 2/3 of the Senate, that's 67 out of 100, to convict Trump. That's on us to ensure. Next, we must expel white nationalists everywhere, but we definitely need to expel them out of our elected seats, our House in Congress, who incited white nationalist violence, especially the 143 House and Senate Republicans. Can you imagine all of the people they represent and will endanger, who worked to undermine the will of the people, who worked against the Electoral College certification? Representative Cori Bush introduced this impressive legislation and made clear that her inspiration was the 14th Amendment to the US Constitution, which was ratified after the Civil War. Her bill would prohibit anyone from holding office that was engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution. And giving the mounting evidence of coordination inside the Capitol building, it is unconscionable for elected officials who conspired with white nationalists who are seeking to commit treason to not be expelled. That's our House, and we're even seeing corporations agree not to donate to them. Hometown papers and longtime Republicans who have been silent and complicit now cowardly speaking out. It's a low bar to say that elected officials should not be conspiring with white nationalists. That's our House. Those are our seats. We must get them expelled. And if we can't get them removed, we will vote them out. I believe that we can do this. And the third one is we must investigate. We must investigate these events, the rogue possible coordination between Capitol Police and white nationalist militias, and we must support Jamal Bowman's coup act, which will set up a congressional commission to fully investigate. And at the same time, it's important that we stand against any efforts that create a bigger police state, more powers to surveil us, to surveil Black and brown people and create more violence. It's clear that that is not what will work. And we need this investigation. So the call to action, right now, I'm asking everyone, actually, the call to action is that everyone pull out their cell phone. And I want you to text expel. I'm not sure. I want you to text expel to 30403. Text expel to 30403 in your cell phone. And that will add your name to hundreds of thousands of us who are calling for this. And it will take all of us. And I believe that we can do it because it is our right. And we, again, have that power. It's why they are so scared. And so all of these three things are necessary to ensure that the GOP pays the big political price after decades of being quiet about white nationalism. It is also important that we stand up right now on the right side. It's not difficult. We know what is right and what is wrong. It is wrong for the politically powerful and connected to not have any consequences while working people continue to suffer. And so it's also important to keep pressure on the mainstream Democrats who are making very dangerous equivocations. And playing nice, going along to get along is not going to save us right now. Fourth, we need to demand an end to the Electoral College. None of this would have happened. Trump's win in 2016, subversion of the 2020 election, would it not be for the Electoral College, which determines who wins the presidency, not by who wins the most votes, but by who wins the right states. Of course, rigged by the GOP. The setup of the Electoral College gives extra weight to small rural states, which happen to be predominantly white and predominantly controlled by the GOP. In the last 8 presidential elections, the GOP candidate has only won the popular vote one time in 2004, 17 years ago. But they have won the presidency 3 times thanks to the Electoral College. This is a profoundly undemocratic way, an unfair way of choosing who controls the most powerful office, and it should be abolished. It clearly is a danger to us. Interestingly, it's important not to forget what I said about gaslighting and manipulation by the Republicans. They get this. In his speech Monday morning, Mitch McConnell pleaded with his Republicans to stop feeding the delusion that Trump won. He knows that we're winning, and he knows that Trump lost. But he also scolded the GOP conspirators to not object to the electors because it would make them lose. And we need his prophecy to come true. Last but not least, there is so much more work to be done, but I will tell you, I have never been more fired up. I have never been more sure about my purpose than to build this multiracial democracy with all of you. It doesn't even feel like work to me. It feels like joy. and freedom. In addition to abolishing the Electoral College, we must work together to make a number of structural reforms to US elections, and we can do it. The John Lewis Voting Act would restore many protections in the right-wing Supreme Court throughout several years ago. House Resolution 1 contains, I get really excited, contains important reforms like public financing of elections, making Election Day a national holiday, no-brainer, and other measures that would make US elections more open and fair. Something extremely heavy on my heart is I think a lot about how I would feel if I was in the National Guard right now. The National Guard in DC falls under the president, and I was terrified last week. It is imperative that we fight for DC statehood in order to have a more equitable and more safe, not just on the National Guard front, but for our democracy. We should also really fight for Representative Nydia Velázquez and Representative Ocasio-Cortez bill to establish a process for Puerto Rican self-determination. And at WFP, we believe Congress should enact reforms that would break up the two-party system. It's a conversation for another day. I've clearly picked a side. I'm the new director of peace and security at WFP, but we're gonna do it. But it's important to remember that single-member winner-take-all elections are a key part to why the far right has been able to take over one of the US two major political parties and gain such a powerful foothold in the US government. You should check out the op-ed from Nalini Stamp and Justice Democrats Walid Shahid making this case. Again, we can do this. Text expel to 30403 if you haven't already signed the petition. Call your elected Congress members, and a little later in the program, we'll talk about actions we can take on MLK Day this Monday. Thanks.
Good, so much joy. You hit the nail on the head. You know, it is a low bar to ask that you not conspire with white supremacists. I mean, you know, how low of a bar can there be? Those demands are right on. We want impeachment, investigate, expel, abolish the Electoral College, restructure our democracy, and we're doing it. We're winning, we're getting there. And so I just can't thank you enough. Now we have another short presentation to help us understand the threat from the far right and how we can keep ourselves and each other safe. Right after that, we will hear a powerful conversation between frontline leaders Barbara Ransby from the Rising Majority, Tinjiwe McHarris from M4BL, and Pam, again, Campos Palma, who you just heard from. They will help us make sense of this moment and let us know how to get involved, so don't miss that. But first, we have Tarso Luis Ramos, who has been researching and challenging the US right wing for more than 25 years. A political research associate, Tarso has launched major initiatives on the far right and law enforcement, anti-Semitism, misogyny, authoritarianism, white nationalism, and other threats to democracy. So next up, more brilliance.
Hello, and thank you for that warm introduction. Boa noite, buenas noches, good evening, afternoon, morning, whatever time zone you're in. I'm honored to join the front line for this important teach-in and call to action to take effective action to block white supremacy and authoritarianism and build transformational, emancipatory, multiracial, and feminist democracy. Thank you, Venetia, for that wonderful calling in. That was amazing. And Pam Campos Palma for the call to action on impeachment, investigation, and the Electoral College. We're gonna, if we could kick off the slides. I can't see the slides as I'm talking, so if we could have the bio slide. I'm Tarso Luis Ramos with Political Research Associates. The next slide, please. PRA is a research and strategy center that uses our work on knowledge of the far right movements to align with and support social justice movements, including the M4BL ecosystem. Next slide. I'm going to talk tonight about three things. The first is understanding the threat from the far right. The second is possibilities for how we respond. And the third is ideas for how we keep ourselves and each other safe. I'm going to move quickly, but we'll post some resources in the chat, and you can check out our website at politicalresearch.org for more information. There's not time for a full rehash of the siege, insurrection, attempted coup in the Capitol a week ago. I know most of you have watched dozens of Twitter videos. We all saw the Trump tell his crew to go to the Capitol and stop the steal. We saw the Confederate flags, Proud Boys, paramilitaries, QAnon guy in the face paint and the horns. We saw the incompetence and apparent complicity from Capitol Hill police, as well as attacks on police officers who tried to stop the mob from getting inside. What did we learn about those experiences, about the threat from the far right? Next slide, please. One useful way to think about this is that the crowd we saw in DC last week was a different one from the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville back in 2017. Yes, it was supremacist, misogynist, anti-Semitic, and many of the things that reflect Trump's base. But where Charlottesville was led by the vanguard of the white nationalist movement, neo-Nazis, self-styled alt-right, neo-Confederates, and some militia, the DC crowd and mob reflected a much wider spectrum of groups, a much larger coalition that is trying to consolidate is the militant resistance movement. It's a cultural as well as a political bloc that appears ready to split with the traditional Republican Party for failing to go all in on authoritarianism by blocking the certification of the election. To use a metaphor from an earlier period in the South, what we saw in DC was less of a Klan rally and more of a lynch mob, right? There was some leadership of the far right there, but a broader coalition. We're still sorting this out, but the DC crowd represents the militant edge of the 40% of Trump voters who are diehard loyalists. The 18 million Republicans who say the election was definitely stolen. The 24 million or so people in the US who support the QAnon conspiracy theory, right? That there's a deep state conspiracy led by pedophiles and all of this kind of thing. This is a mass base for authoritarian politics who will sacrifice democracy to block the emergence of real multiracial democracy. This is not the first time in the United States history that we've seen a bloc like this, obviously. And they threatened to try to make the country ungovernable under a Biden-Harris administration. So definitely some strong headwinds coming on this. Historical precedents for what we're seeing in terms of this bloc include the Tea Parties under Obama and the birtherism, and the militia and broader New World Order movements of the 1990s. These earlier movements brought both the same kind of grassroots militancy we're seeing now and huge electoral impact, capturing Congress in 1994 and again in 2010, just to give some context for that. Next slide, please. Some white militias and white nationalist groups scaled down or actually sat out the action in DC last week. Some of these folks who want a race war have been more focused on the coming date of January 17th. And this period of January 17th through the inauguration is a very dangerous period for our mobilizations, not only in DC, which will be difficult after the insurrection, but at state capitals around the country. So a much more distributed set of threats. To give a sense of the crowd that this attracts, they're smaller but potentially more violent, right? Militias in this country, groups like the Oath Keepers and 3%ers, have 15 to 20,000 active militia members and maybe 100,000 supporters across hundreds of groups. The white supremacist accelerationists, folks after Civil War, groups like the Boogaloo Boys and others, have maybe 10 to 20,000 regular followers, and others are much smaller factions. And then groups like the Proud Boys, which we all know from being name-checked by Trump and being out in force in DC, their active membership is somewhere in the 5 to 20,000 member range. Many of these groups mobilized over the summer in direct response to the massive Black-led racial justice mobilizations. PRA tracked these incidents, many of which involved white mobs, which is to say they weren't always led by these organized groups, but they attracted crowds of armed, angry white folks. Next slide, please. The perceived success of the DC insurrection, with relatively small numbers, these folks managed to breach the Capitol for the first time since 1814, will likely bring growth to some of these groups, right? And also bring a pivot of Trump's nationalist space into a strong anti-government, anti-state stance. Next slide, please. So one of the largest indirect threats that the far-right mobilizations in this moment pose for us through the Capitol attack is that it will provide a pretext for the escalation of counterterrorism and national security surveillance policing complex. So a very important lesson is that after the 1995 bombing of the Oklahoma City federal building, which killed 168 people, there was a bipartisan federal response that passed the 1996 anti-terrorism and immigration laws. These were laws that ultimately come back to mostly hurt Black and Brown communities. They were the laws that were activated very forcefully after the 9/11 attacks to go after Muslim communities as one sort of an example. So there's an opportunity for the Mitch McConnell wing of the GOP to align with the incoming Biden-Harris administration to try to ice out the nationalists in the Trump coalition in a national security kind of coalition. Other indirect threats include calls for unity. You know, we already heard about this from Pam. Sort of this power evasive notion that it's time for healing rather than for truth telling and resources for multiracial democracy. Certainly, there's an ongoing threat of tacit and even active cooperation between law enforcement and the far right. We do work on that. And also renewed threats, of course, to the courts and others to civil and reproductive rights, corporate regulation, and so forth. Next slide, please. So what posture does this put us in? Next slide. Several things. The first is that there are opportunities to block, split, isolate, and compete with the right. It's critical to block the Biden administration shift to the right, including around using counterterrorism as the opportunity to do that. There are opportunities now to split the Republican Party, the Republican coalition between the neoliberals and the corporate folks and the nationalists. Not that we want to support the neoliberals and the corporate folks, but we do want a divided right-wing opposition. And so pushing for impeachment, for expulsion, for abolition of the electoral college, these are very effective in our view ways to split the right, the electoral right and the governing right. It's critical that we go after far-right politicians, specifically to defund them, expel them, put pressure on corporations to block their campaign contributions and other things that are already in motion now. And it's really important to cut off the potential bases of collaboration with far-right movements, right? Pulling corporations, pulling centrists, pulling youth culture away from the far-right's ability to recruit as they try to surge in this period going forward. Next slide. Critically, we think in terms of block and build. And if most of what I just described were ways to split and to block the right, it's critically important that we maintain a forward momentum, stay the course on racial justice, pro-democracy culture shifts, built through the racial justice process of the last 9 months that pulls liberals, right, in centrist leftward around our agenda. Stay the course on the divest, invest, care economy, breathe act agenda. Own the democracy discourse. Defending democracy is not defending this kind of corporate, white supremacist democracy. The only acceptable future is a multiracial, feminist, emancipatory democracy of the kind that pulled us back from a second term, denied a second term to white nationalism and theocracy, and own that space, occupy that discourse around what democracy really means, and to build out the infrastructure and independent political capacity of radical Black and POC-led and multiracial movements, as we saw so powerfully in Georgia and Arizona. So that block and that build. Next slide, please. We also need to really inform our resistance to understand and undercut the other parts of the authoritarian coalition. It's not just the white nationalists that undergird this authoritarian coalition. It's the theocratic right. It's the neoliberal and corporate pillar. It's at least a three-legged stool, and we have to prepare to go after all of it, including competing through powerful, progressive, faith-based organizing. And we have to prepare for sustained escalating state and vigilante attacks. State attacks through this kind of counterterrorism framework that goes after Black and Brown communities, and of course, increased vigilantism from the far right. Next slide. And in terms of preparation and keeping our folks safe, just a last few words. Preparation, not paranoia. Building resources for common sense movement security capacities. Understanding our antagonists, and right-sizing far-right threats. We know organizers who will stand down a line of police in riot gear, but get super worried when they hear that Klan are coming because they're just less familiar. So right-sizing those threats, becoming familiar with and aware of what are the specific far-right formations that exist in our local communities, and developing concrete plans for addressing them. This image is of a guide, a field activist guide to the far right that PRA produced. You can find it on our website that breaks down what are some of the common threats. In developing security teams within our organizations for our mobilizations and for our personal security. Next slide. These are some resources that PRA has produced. We'll have links in the chat. I encourage folks to look at this incident map that we produced of armed right-wing resistance to multiracial and Black-led protests over the course of the last 9 months. Look up your geographic region. It'll give you a pretty good sense of which groups are active in your region, so you kind of know what you're dealing with. This is the guide to the armed far right, and this is another map that tracks far-right complicity with sheriff's departments across the United States, a project we look to expand to other examples of far-right and police complicity. Next slide. I think that's it for me. Thank you so much for your time. Again, preparation, not paranoia. The right is surging because we are winning. And so the purpose of understanding the right and preparing ourselves with security is so that we can continue to build and advance towards actual multiracial, emancipatory, feminist democracy, not so that we're on our heels. Thanks so much, and I look forward to the next discussion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tarso. We are winning. The right is surging because we are winning. I want to go ahead and move us on to our powerful panel. I'm really pleased to introduce you to some of our really most powerful leaders on the front line in dialogue with each other. They will help us digest what we just learned, continue to make sense of this moment, and share what actions they're taking now and why, and invite us all to get involved. So first, we have Dr. Barbara Ransby from the Rising Majority. She's a historian, a writer, and a longtime political activist and leader and mentor to many of us. We'll also be joined by Tenjiwe McHarris, who is my close friend and comrade. And we'll again hear from Pam Campos Palma from the Working Families Party, who will go even deeper on her powerful presentation. So I'm going to hand it over now to our three leaders to take us.
Hey, y'all. Hopefully you all can hear me. Very honored, inspired, and excited to be joined by Barbara and Pam. And I'll just get us started and then kick it over to Barbara. Just always so grateful to hear from Pam, from Tarso, reminded that we have to be grounded in intel. We have to be grounded in facts. We have to be grounded in assessment. So that we are moving not based on panic. We're not developing strategy based on fear, but based on an accurate assessment of the current conditions. So just very grateful to hear from them. And I want to talk about two actions that the Frontline is calling people into in this moment. But first, I just want to reflect on some of what I just heard. And, this time is about all of us making meaning out of this moment, making meaning so that we can move in purpose as people that calls or identifies as being part of social movement, being in community. So I just want to share a couple of reflections, a couple of thoughts, and then talk a little bit about some of the actions that we have coming up, and then pass it to some of my comrades. And I just want to first start off by saying, we're feeling a lot in this moment. We can't deny it. where folks are feeling rage, we're feeling grief, we're feeling anger. Some folks are feeling disappointment. And then there's also just pure exhaustion. And I just feel like it's important to hold that and honor that. It's in our bodies, it's in our spirits. And that's why when we talk about centering love, when we talk about centering the love of our people, when we talk about joy, these are not just sort of individual choices. This is actually critical components to movement building. It allows for us to be imaginative, but also to understand that winning is not only possible, but it's coming. And so I just want to say that. But the truth is that we cannot deny that this is a very intense time. We're angry. Folks are angry because this country continues to show us not what it's becoming, but what it always has been, a country where institutions and policies are racist, sexist, xenophobic, and many of our politicians are way more loyal to the interests of those with deep pockets than they are interested in the will or the needs of the people. And all of this paved the road to where we are today. All of this has paved the road to what we saw last week. So in this moment, we must challenge not only white supremacist violent attacks, we also have to challenge the systems and institutions that are responsible for them, the systems and institutions that got us here. And, this is a moment where we have to be honest. We need sobering assessments. There is a white nationalist movement that is growing and has been growing in this country. And they are emboldened by those in power, whether they're sheriffs in different parts of the nation or it's the current sitting president. And so we have to be honest about that. And as Tarso shared, we need to prepare, we need to understand what's happening so that we can develop strategy based on that. And it's clear, obviously, we're up against a wave of hate and violence. And even as the right-wing opposition or the pro-Trump coalition, whatever we call it, is fracturing, we still have to prepare ourselves. So preparation in this moment for everyone in social movements is key. And we have to understand, obviously, the nature of the movement so we can prepare. And again, we have to not be guided by fear. We cannot be guided by fear. We have to be guided by imagination and what's possible, and also what our people deserve. And we also have to center the safety of our people. This is going to be key in the coming days, weeks, months, years, from vigilante violence or state violence. This includes our neighbors, our leaders in our communities, to those who are in Congress right now, who are putting their lives on the line to champion what is right. And so it is our duty as social movement, it is our duty as people in community to protect and defend Representative Cori Bush, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, AOC, and all those that are standing on the right side of history. It is our duty and our responsibility to protect all of us, including them there. I also want to say before I pass it off is that this is a time where we cannot go backwards. We cannot go backwards, only forward. We must be bold. We must be courageous. This is movement building times. Our lives are literally on the line. It's time that we, without hesitation, call for the accountability of not only Donald Trump, but every single, and I'm going to say this again, every single member of Congress that not only tried to block the certification of the election, but has been fanning the flames of white supremacy for years. It is our time to call accountability for them. And we also have to advance transformative demands. This is a time where we have to be clear. We cannot be distracted. We have to move forward. And these demands are demands in defense of Black lives, demands in defense of Indigenous lives, immigrant lives, trans lives, poor and working class people. We cannot weaken our demands in this moment. We have to refuse and reject that. We also have to refuse to engage in conversations around false unity. You cannot have unity with someone or something that is determined to destroy you. There can be no unity without accountability and transformation. And before I pass it off, I just also want us to be clear that the violence, and it was said before throughout this conversation, the violence that we're seeing that's escalating, is because we have never been more powerful. They are terrified because they see our victory on the horizon. Millions of people with beating hearts are demanding that we fight for everything that we deserve. And so now is the time that we build movement and we center our demands of accountability, and we also center our demands around transformation and structural change. And I want to get into that in a little bit, as well as these two actions that we're calling for. One is a mass organizing meeting that we're calling for thousands and thousands of people to join us on Saturday, January 16th. And then we're also calling for actions across the country on MLK Day, an important day in our people's history and people's history in this country and around the world. But before I get into that, I just want to pass it over to my dear comrade, someone that I look up to significantly, Barbara Ransby.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you for that, Tinjiwe. I mean, I'm so happy to be a part of this conversation tonight. It's such an important conversation. It's very empowering and inspiring. For those of you who may not know, the Rising Majority, which I'm representing on this call, is a Black-led multiracial coalition that was founded by M4BL. Working Families Party Director Mo Mitchell was one of our founders, and we're very proud of that. And it's a coalition of 50 plus organizations around the country, ranging from folks doing work on immigration to housing to combating racist policing and so forth. So we are proud of the leadership of the Frontline, the Working Families Party, EJP, and United We Dream for calling on us all to stand tall and stand together in this moment. It is a historic moment, a watershed moment in the long freedom struggle. And where you stand at this point, whether you stand at this point, is critical. I mean, I'm a historian. I write about the Black freedom movement. I think about what are those twists and turns in history that set, our country and the world on a different path. This is one of those moments. So when I think about the 1960s, and I think about, and as I do often, I think about the heroic choices that people made in that era. Right, we recently lost John Lewis and other people who fought the good fight back in the day. But people stood up to vicious white supremacist attacks. No one was even pretending to keep those racists in check. So I think of the 1961 Freedom Rides, when a small group of civil rights volunteers boarded buses and headed into the Deep South to effectively desegregate interstate transportation. They were brutally attacked. Their buses were firebombed. They had so many threats, they could barely get a bus driver that was willing to drive the bus to take them further along the journey. They encountered a particularly violent attack in Anniston, Alabama. And CORE, Congress on Racial Equality, which was at that point leading the rise, decided this is enough. We don't want to lose people to this. We're gonna fly the rest of the way. We're not gonna try to drive through this. And in stepped SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Diane Nash, a very young woman at the time. And they said, no, we are not going to succumb to fear, and we're not going to succumb to racist vigilantes. And the rides continued. Another example comes to mind from 1966, when James Meredith took to the back roads of Mississippi in a march against fear. He did that solo. He did that without the full robustness of the movement. And he was wounded on the second day. He was shot by a sniper. He survived. He's, I think, still living. But what happened is the movement's response. People could have pulled back. People could have hid in fear. People could have said, not me. But the rest of the movement stepped up. Some people who bitterly disagreed with each other on tactics stepped up and stood together and marched in James Meredith's path. The Deacons for Defense, a Louisiana-based Black freedom group, provided security on that march. Dr. King, Kwame Ture, many others were in the lead. And that march continued despite a number of threats and attacks. So this is our crucible moment. We have to muster the courage to resist, to build a movement that is utterly antithetical to the carnival of violence and white nationalism that we saw on display last Wednesday. A people of color-led, Black-led, multiracial movement that is grounded in a set of principles that understands not only what we're against, but what we're for. This is, in my view, a moment of danger and radical possibility, exhilarating radical possibility, and how appropriate that we will come together on MLK Day to say zero tolerance for white supremacy. and to connect the dots, as King did, between white nationalism, state violence, and racial capitalism. Let us not forget that King died decrying the excesses of racial capitalism, indicting a system that would risk the lives of workers, paying them very, very little for very, very arduous and dangerous work, marching alongside the Memphis sanitation workers. That is where he risked and ultimately lost his life. At the same time, speaking out against US empire in the war in Vietnam. So poverty, labor rights, anti-war sentiments, these were the ideas that animated King in his last days, and we should carry that with us when we come together on MLK Day this year. We may look at those large crowds that we saw in Washington last Wednesday. They may be many, but we are more. And we are more not only in numbers, but we are more because we are looking forward and not backward. In the M4BL website has a statement that says we build power and we encounter resistance. The resistance that we're seeing is a resistance that is desperate, right? Literally clawing at the outside edifice of the Capitol. It is desperate because we are building the kind of movement with the kind of determination, millions of people facing tear gas and in the middle of a pandemic, marching through the streets of this country, saying no to racist violence, standing up for the dignity and value of the life of someone like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. So that is the sentiment we have to tap. That is the heart, the courage, the determination, the politic that we have to build on, building through electoral channels and also building a grassroots movement that will march through the streets of this country, envisioning, demanding, singing, crying for a better society, a better future, the future we deserve. So I certainly will be there on January 16th and be there on MLK Day and look forward to this work, not only in the short term, but in the long term. I want to pass it now to Pam.
I'm just blown away. I mean, it's, the last week has been gripping for me personally. I think there's my intellectual brain that was very clear. I think my life as a queer Latina, I'm the daughter of Honduran and Guatemalan immigrants, trained me very well about racism and injustice at a very young age. The military also trained me. I did military intelligence. And so I was very clear on what was happening. I'm not surprised that there are white nationalists in the police and the military. In fact, I've met them. It is what politicized me so much to demand accountability in these institutions. But my emotional self has been all over the map. And I think AOC spoke really importantly and could have even saved lives in talking about what the trauma from this kind of violence and corruption really means for us. And especially, I think Black, brown, and working class people are expected to just keep going in this cycle. And I think that that's really difficult. As a military veteran, I felt so conflicted seeing those images last week. I, on the one hand, was not surprised, but I thought a lot about the Black and brown legislative staffers. I thought a lot about how I saw white nationalists, insurrectionists being in places in that Capitol that even senior legislative staffers don't get to be in. Not because of seniority, but because it's supposed to be one of the most securitized and protected places. And one thing that I'm thinking about a lot is why the threat of white domination and supremacy is not something that many people see as a threat. And I think often we think about this, this caricature of, someone wearing a MAGA hat that is just very violent. But what got me, in last week, on top of the war trauma that I felt and I felt almost, I felt so much grief to think that the war trauma that I knew was now experienced, not just by the people in that building, but all of us who were watching in horror. And there were no uniforms. It was just all of us together. Um, and I thought a lot about why it is that so many folks were saying, I can't believe that people would do this. And it's important to remember that Black and Brown communities have been saying this for so long. And this is a moment where accountability has to start with self. Some of these things feel so big, so enormous, not just the challenges we face, but even the dreams that we have. Sometimes I feel like I can't hold the dreams for the future in me. And it's important for me to remember that brilliant, incredible, um, resilient people of the past have labored for us to be here. Our ancestors have really done the incredible, magical, powerful work, and we stand on their shoulders. I also remember that I'm not alone and that it's with all of us. And I also know that some of the hardest work is to face the people around me that I think don't want to hear me. And I think that was the most painful thing is I was not surprised to see insurrection by, frankly, if you think about it, really importantly, on an analysis trip, this attempted coup has been happening, frankly, for months. The fact that we did not really remember that there was Proud Boys stabbing journalists months ago, that there was a MAGA march that erupted in violence, that there was a bombing by a white person, and it just kind of went away, right? I want to know, were Capitol tours being done when all of these white nationalists were in that city months ago? So let's not forget, this is not just one event, but it's a series of events. And I think the thing that hurt me most, that made me feel so much grief, was not the white nationalists that were, that are clearly our opponents, but folks that claim moderation but don't want to have courage in this moment. Mm. I believe that there is a side to choose. I want to leave this life feeling free. I don't want to feel fear that just because we might disagree and I might not be heard, that will make me less safe. And so, I'm rationalizing with a lot, but everything that I heard from Tenji and Barbara reminded me that I think it's okay to say that this is a big moment. And I think it's also important for us to remind each other that I believe that we really can do this. I hear some people saying, well, I don't know if we can get them out. We have already done the impossible, friends. We have already shown our power, which is why white nationalist backlash happened. And I don't know about you, but I'm being very reminded of my power, of my brilliance, and that no white nationalist wants to tangle with us. So I believe that we will win. I believe that we already impeached him. I think that we have the ability to really convict, to expel these folks. And investigating is a bare minimum. Again, these are not tall orders. Let's do the work now so we can build the world we deserve.
Thanks, Pam. I'm just, I'm really inspired, and I had a number of things I wanted to say, but then you just inspired me to say other things. And obviously very inspired by Barbara, as always. But I know I only have a minute, so I'll just keep it. I'll keep it really brief because I want to focus a lot of my time talking about these two actions that we want to invite people into. But I do just want to say quickly, I feel like it's really important that as social movements we consider three things in this moment. The first, and it reminds me of what you're saying, Pam, which and an important quote by Cabral, which is tell no lies and claim no easy victories. We actually, there will be no easy victories. And so we are living in a moment where we need to focus on what is immediately ahead of us in terms of mitigating harms, the escalation of violence. But we also need to think about long-term, over the next several years, or over the next several decades, a strategy that will move our people towards liberation. And so I just wanted to lift that up. Sometimes we get into this false dichotomy of either focusing on the short term or the long term, and we have to choose. That was set up for social movements to fail. If you are not focusing on the long term, then your strategy around the short term is probably not rooted in an actual vision. And so we must do both. And then the second is that this is a time more than ever that we have to put forward a bold, courageous, powerful vision that our people can feel, taste, and understand. And in fact, they need to feel like it was spoken from their hearts and their bellies and their spirits. It's in their tradition that we are talking about a vision for our people where everybody has a home, where every child eats, where everybody can feel that they're living within a governing structure where their thoughts, their decisions actually matter, true democracy, radical democracy, and that they're living with an economy where their lives are what's prioritized, that the planet is what's prioritized, that we must talk louder than their hate, we must yell louder than their violence, a vision, a radical, beautiful, powerful vision for our people that our people can feel, taste, understand, and embrace. And if we do not do that, then we have politically failed our people and generations coming. But I think the beauty is that it's already being yelled from social movements across the country. And the last piece I just want to say is like, it is our duty to build the movement of movements. We have to be united in such a way that we can prove to them we are much stronger, but we are also bigger than you. We will protect and defend each other, not just with numbers, but they have to understand that United We Dream's demand of defunding ICE and CPP is my demand. That the demands of my indigenous family is our demands. They have to understand that we are united in ways that they are deeply fearful of. And so this is why we're calling for, as the front line, for two specific actions in this moment. One is on January 16th, Monifa talked about earlier, we're calling for what we're calling for Forward Together. What this is a mass organizing meeting. This is a meeting where you will be part of a meeting with thousands of people to organize and to strategize about how we build the bigger we, about our demands, and how we move towards a pathway forward. So we want people to go to thefrontline.org to look at the hashtag Forward Together. And I believe that there's probably a link on the screen as well, and join the January 16th organizing meeting that's coming up this Saturday. And then second, I just wanted, and I'll be very quick, is MLK Day. MLK Day is an important part of our history, our legacy. And so what we're asking for people across the country is join us in taking actions. We want to meet people where they are. So whether it's holding a vigil, dropping a banner, engaging in mutual aid, doing a billboard, etc. This is a moment that we have to take action, from showing up for what our people need to calling for conviction of Trump using a banner or a billboard. We want to show the diversity of our tactics, but the powerfulness of our movement. So join us on MLK Day. Take actions with us. We will have resources, and again, there's links and materials probably in the screen, and we will share it with you. We think that this is our moment and an important moment. And I just want to end by saying there's two important quotes. I already said the Cabral one, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. But there's another quote that's really important to me that I carry in my work, and it's a Fanon quote. And it says, each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it or betray it. I believe our generation has a powerful mission in this moment to yell loudly, scream at the top of our lungs the vision that our people deserve, and to advance a strategy so that the next generation will experience the type of liberation that they deserve. And I just want to say thank you and apologize for going over, and I'll pass it to Barbara.
Oh, am I? I think you said it all, sister. I think we're over our time, but happy to be a part of this conversation, this intergenerational conversation. And I think, the Fanon quote is a perfect way to end. So we'll pass it to the next.
That was so inspiring. I'm so moved, Thank you so much, Barbara, for uplifting the Black liberation movement of the 60s and 70s and naming some of the people who are still with us and some who are gone. It makes me think of some of those who struggled, who are actually still incarcerated. It makes me think of Mumia Abu-Jamal and Mutulu Shakur and, Russell Maroon Schultz and Sundiata Kohli and so many. And so this conversation is intergenerational. The work that we're doing and our movements are connected. We're a part of a trajectory, and the work is never done, but it is a struggle of joy and freedom. So next up for inspiration, now we'll hear a report back from Right to the City, about the National Day of Action Against Evictions that happened today. We're going to hear from Pam Fan, and she is the Right to the City's senior field organizer. Welcome, Pam.
Hello, thank you so much. Hi, y'all. Just wanted to give a report back from today. I'm so moved. I agree. Our speakers were beyond amazing and uplifting, and hopefully sharing what folks did today can also be inspiring. Today, we grew in power as the Renter Nation. Tenants, working class homeowners, and those who are unhoused came together and showed up. They showed up in 19 cities. In Atlanta, activists built a living room outside the CDC. In LA, musicians and artists gave wake-up calls to their county board of supervisors. In Boston, Miami, tenants rallied on housing court steps. In Minneapolis and Providence and Lexington, there were dance parties and car caravans to shut down the streets. And then in DC and Detroit, calls flooded elected officials all day long. And finally, in Philly, Portland, New York, and Memphis, folks rallied together in person or virtually. All of these cities had the same message, that housing is the cure. We called on Joe Biden and the incoming CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, to stop playing around, right? Stop evictions. They say it will save lives. None of these half-hearted measures, these loopholes that can only generate huge profits for the few. Today, we showed up. Tenants showed up. And we showed everyone that we are the front line. And right now, we are the ones who have the solutions, and that folks should be listening to us when it comes to these transformative ideas around housing, jobs, and health. So we're really excited to share all these different actions. Check out the hashtag Housing is the Cure on social media to see, and we're getting some really big shout outs and good coverage. Lastly, we'd also like to invite folks to the upcoming Frontline Defenders trainings on how to take action against evictions and deportations. During this global pandemic, the last thing our communities need to worry about is being evicted or deported. There will be 2 trainings on Wednesday, January 27th, and Wednesday, February 3rd at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. You can use the link below to RSVP. Don't miss out, right? We have so much to defend, just as our panel was talking about. And this is how we come together and fight together for our collective liberation. We're excited to see you. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pam. Okay, guys, it's go time. Okay, I'm just going to repeat a few top lines. We want to make sure that you text EXPEL, EXPEL, to 30403. That's 30403 to sign our petition and make a call to your members of Congress, okay? Because we want to impeach, expel, investigate, and abolish the Electoral College. And then we want you to join us on Saturday, January 16th, for Forward Together. This is a mass organizing virtual event. We want you to take action on MLK Day in any way that you can. No action is too big and no action is too small. And sign up for Frontline Defenders training. There's going to be one on January 27th and another one on February 3rd. This movement is powerful. We are winning. We are intergenerational. Every time you open social media and you see another company pull its money from a legislator who has identified with white supremacists, every time you see a president being impeached for the second time, for the first time in history, every time you see all of the things on the media that they say, this is unprecedented, this is unprecedented, this is unprecedented, just know that you made this happen. We made this happen together. Forward together, we are winning, and we will define what is next. Don't let anyone put a container around what can happen next. Don't let anyone tell us that we're confined to the current bills and laws and structures. We have a moment to completely and totally reimagine those laws and those structures. So thank you for joining the front line tonight. We love you.